right, welcome to another episode of Butler's Babble, where we aim to empower, motivate, and inspire you to have the best life possible. And we do that by bringing in different guests every week who want to share their stories of resilience to help you guys out. And today is going to be no different story than that. But before we get on, let me just remind you that if you're watching this on YouTube, don't be afraid to subscribe and hit that bell, so notification bell, so you know when we do another episode all the time. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast, whatever platform you're listening to, make sure you give us a subscribe button there and a like button so you know all the time when we're going to come on and you can watch and listen to different episodes of these resilient people. Today's guest comes to us all the way from South Australia. He was a South Australian police officer who was operating in a special task and rescue group called STAR, which is similar to like the Navy SEALs in the States, but not as high, but higher than the police. I'll let him explain it to you, of course. He explains it a lot better than I do. And but he's also going to talk about his resilience of how he was able to survive when they were trying to apprehend a suspect, and he got shot 14 times and led there bleeding for 3 hours before they were able to come and rescue him. And he's still here. He survived, and he's here to tell us the story. So we're going to bring him on and let him tell his story. So why don't you welcome to the show, Mr. Derrick McManus. Derrick, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. It really is. Butler's Babble sounds like such a lot of fun.
It always is. It always is. We try and take some of these tragic stories and turn a little twist on it to show people no matter what they go through, you can still turn things around and live a beautiful life. So guests like you are able to inspire people like that. And I hope I got the bio correct. But why don't we go way back before all that happened, of course, and let's find out a little bit of who Derrick was growing up. So give us a little back history of Derrick growing up as a little guy.
Okay, so for the first 3 years of life, I was in Scotland, born in Scotland, came out to Australia, turned 3 on the boat on the way out here. We moved to South Australia straight away. Well, we landed in Melbourne, which some of your audience may know. Landed in Melbourne, travelled overland on a very old, rattly train, very uncomfortable, I'm told, and got to South Australia, and I've stayed in South Australia for the majority of my life. I've done extensive travelling since then, but always lived in South Australia, and grew up primary schools. I went to a couple of different primary schools. The area I grew up in was Elizabeth, and if you know anything about Cold Chisel or Jimmy Barnes, that's where he grew up as well. So it's a very tough area to grow up, as Jimmy Barnes will tell you. But yeah, as far as I knew, life was good, and I enjoyed life. Had a very, very supportive, positive family, and positive family environment, and it really was good growing up.
And what did your parents do for a living?
My father originally worked in a asbestos factory, and so you know that has caused some issues for the family. But then he became a insurance salesman, and then he became a car salesman, and was a car salesman most of his life. Excelling. South Australia is one of the smallest populated states, but even though it's one of the smallest populated states, Dad was number 5 in the country as a car salesman, so he was exceptionally good at it. Mum was a seamstress.
I was just curious because you said you were born in Scotland until you were about 3. What made you guys move from Scotland to Australia? Was there a certain reason? You guys just, did your family, your parents just want to do something different?
My grandparents were already out here. So my family followed my grandparents, but essentially it was for a better life. Things were going nowhere in Scotland, becoming more expensive, and Scotland, I've been back there a few times. Beautiful, beautiful country, but they are struggling financially.
Okay, and you have some siblings, I believe, an older brother and a younger sister.
Yeah, I've got a brother who's 2 years older than me, and a sister who is 5 years younger.
Okay. And you grew up in a rough neighborhood. So when you say rough, do you mean rough as in just financially rough area, or do you mean physically rough, like gangs in the streets, things like that?
While we were there were no gangs. But my father has said several times he saw it going downhill. And
Okay.
these days, whatever it is, 40, 50 years later, it is a gangland. People say that when they start heading into Elizabeth these days, they lock their doors, they wind their windows up, and they hope to get through, even though they're just driving through it. So you would compare it similar to the Bronx.
Okay. That's what was
Yeah,
going through my mind as you're describing that. Yeah.
yeah.
So you're a kid, you're growing up in a rough neighborhood. Did this affect your schooling at all? Was it a rough school that you were going to? Were you a popular kid there, not popular? Were you into sports? What kind of a student were you?
Um, it was a very rough school. I got bullied. I'd walk down the uh, hallway in the school, and if this one particular kid was coming the other way, he'd just reach out and just punch me in the head as I was going past. Um, it was just what he did. I never felt like the popular kid at school. Even though I had a good group of friends, I didn't feel like I was center of it at all. I was always on the periphery. Um,
Uh-huh.
I was not a great scholar at all, but I was very good at sport. Um, and I just don't think I don't think school inspired me enough. Because since school I've gone on and studied many things and shown that when I am interested in it, I can study extremely well. But school just didn't do it for me. It seemed that I would rather go surfing than study at school.
Was it more, do you think, the environment? Was it the teachers were not very inspiring for the students? And when stuff like that, going down the hallway getting punched, was it like that in classrooms? Like there were teachers just sort of putting it to the side, not even paying attention to it? Or like, do you think that was one of the reasons why you weren't inspired in school? Is it something to do with the being bullying? Is it something to do with just teachers weren't interesting enough in the classes? Or
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. The It could have been that I just didn't enjoy school. I
yeah.
I didn't mind the friendship circle. I knew that if I went to, at certain times I'd be bullied, but the majority of my time was good at school. I
Mhm.
just wasn't inspired to actually study for whatever reason.
Yeah, so just the academics didn't inspire you, but the social aspect it was really well for you.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Now, did you do any when you said you pretty much excelled in sports though, and that were you on any of the teams in school, or was there teams that you could be on, or
No, I was never on a sports team at school, believe it or not. Whenever we had an athletics day, yeah, I would perform rather well, but I was never on a sports team at school. Now, when I left school and went to the police academy, I was on almost every sports team in the police academy. The swimming team, the
okay.
volleyball team, the table tennis team, um, the running team. Yeah, you know, again, I excelled, but I didn't realize how athletic I was. Like we went for I've never been into long distance running, and we went for a beach run with the whole of the academy. So 300 police cadets between 17 and 20. And I just got running alongside this one guy who said, "Yeah, I know how to run." And so I said, "Oh, well, I'll try and stick with you as much as I can." I ended up just running with him and coming in sixth out of 300. And I thought to myself, "Oh, okay, well, everybody else must not be all that good." But apparently I was quite reasonable.
Yeah, and the only reason I bring some of those stuff up is I'm sure there's a lot of kids that go through the same situation. They're very intelligent individuals, but they're just in a situation where the school environment's not helping them out, or it could be that they're being bullied, or it could be, like you said, you didn't even realize how good you were in sports until after you got out of school. It's almost like it was just that environment. You just didn't want to be in it. Like you said, the social aspect, you're hanging out with your friends, that was the great part. But when you had to go to class or you had to deal with going down the hallway and things like that, you just didn't want to be there. So I'm sure a lot of individuals have gone through that, or they're going through that, and it affects them later on in life. I'm sure some of them that are not successful are because of things that were implanted into them as they were growing up. So that's the only reason I was asking that, because you were able to become very successful. So um, now going through school, then you graduate high school, I guess, in the normal amount of time. Did you know when you were getting like grade 11, grade 12, what you wanted to be? Like you wanted to be on the police force, or did that come later on after you graduated and you're just like, I don't know what I want to do? Or did you go to college first, or how did that all work out when you graduated?
So when I was going through school, we spoke about fourth year and matriculation, and that's equivalent to year 11 and year 12, as they talk about it these days. I failed year 11 twice because I just wasn't the academic student, but I got a recommendation from my headmaster at the time, the principal, and he said, Derrick doesn't have very good results, but anything that Derrick wants to focus on, he will be very successful at. Um, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had an older brother, 2 years older than me, and my brother wanted to be a police officer, and my brother was my hero. And whatever
Mhm.
Brian wanted to do, Derrick wanted to do. It was kind of that default thing. He really was my hero. So he wanted to be a police officer, and I've gone, oh, I want to be a police officer as well. And everybody said, you only want to do it because Brian wants to do it. And, as a child, however old I was at the time, 10, 11, 12, I've gone, no, no, it's me, independent. I want to be able to do it in, whatever child
Mhm.
language it was at the time. And my brother changed his mind. My brother became a butcher, but I couldn't change my mind. Otherwise, that would prove everybody right. So I went on and became a police officer, even though I was,
Just to spite them.
yeah. Um, and it was a career I enjoyed. I was, I was never ever a passionate police officer, though. I know police officers who live, sleep, breathe, eat policing all day long, every day, and they can't get enough of it. They research it, all those. That I was never a passionate police officer to that extent, but I was very good at being a police officer. In my very early career, they had a dearth of sergeants where I was at, and I was a probationary. Sorry, no, I was a first class constable at the time, which is a couple of ranks down from sergeant. But they've come to me and they've said, Derrick, we have a lack of sergeants at the moment. We want you to step up for the next 2 weeks and be a sergeant on this team. Are you prepared to do it? And I've gone, seriously, me? Okay, sure. So again, other people saw the potential. I just didn't realize it.
Mhm. And a lot of times that's what it takes. It takes somebody else to point something out, because um, I know with myself too, there's certain things I've done in my life, whether it be with my photography career or anything I do. And they're like, oh, yeah, you should do this. You'd be great at this. And I never thought of it before. And then when I actually start doing it, it's like, you know what? I am good at this and I do enjoy doing it. Um, so how long were you in the police force when this was happening, when they were saying, okay, go do this for 2 weeks and see if you like it?
I'm just going to go back. I'll come back to that question in a minute. As you were talking before, sometimes you don't realize how good you are, and other people do. Something we will talk about in a little while are some of the philosophies that I have these days. And one of them is that we've got to overcome the inner critic. And our inner critic, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in life, no matter how successful, how fit, unfit you are, whatever it might be, we have this little voice inside our head that's always going, you're not good enough, you're an idiot, other people are better than you. It is always there. And I don't care whether you're a CEO or owner of a business, as soon as you want to take that next step, that voice is always there. And then there's something else that I'll talk about, which is you've got to be great at what you do best. The only reason we don't see it is because of that little voice going, oh, you're not good enough. But other people see it. So when other people pick up on it, I realize now we've actually got to just go, okay, maybe that's something I don't see, and I should grasp hold of it and run with it and be great at what we do best. So I've been in the police force probably about 7 or 8 years at that stage. And at back in that day, you had to wait your turn to become sergeant. And so the journey to get to sergeant level was about 15 to 18 years. It's changed now because it's on a merit base rather than just waiting your turn. But I was only in there about 7 years, and they came to me and gone, "We have a lack of sergeants. Can you step up?" And I've gone, "Sure, okay." I felt very comfortable doing it. I felt like I could do it, but I'd just never seen it.
Yeah, and I understand that because I know um, I'm into a lot of the I watch a lot of YouTube channels myself, and one thing I like to watch is stuff about the old U.S. mafia and things like that from the days of the John Gottis and things like that, and they talk about um, when they opened in the 70s, when they reopened the books, as they called it, where people were getting made again, becoming captains or capos and things like that. And the only reason I bring that up is there was some people that when they opened the books that were made, turned into made men, that there was other guys, old timers ahead of them that weren't being made and were getting overlooked, I guess you could say, and kind of get
Yep.
resentful. How come I've been here waiting this long and now they are getting it when they just came in at this time? Did you find any of that? Because you said at that time it'd only been 7, 8 years, and usually you had to wait almost 15 years to become a sergeant. And did you sort of leapfrog over people that maybe wanted that and said, oh, "Well, I've been here longer. Why is he getting it?" Did you get any resentful that way?
Um, I'm sure there was. I didn't notice it. The team that I was on, went to, were a very junior team, and they didn't have anybody senior on there. I only stepped up for a couple of weeks and then went back to my rank. So I wasn't in that position for a long time. But we went through the same thing. We had the time based wait your turn, and then at some stage they'd gone, "Hang on, the wrong people are getting promoted here. There are more qualified people. We're going to now do it on merit." And there became so much vitriol over those people who were young getting promoted.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that. I mean, some people just, they're in it for the wrong reasons, if I can say it that way. And they think they should just be promoted just because they've been there long enough, not because they did the work, if that makes sense.
And that was the system back then. But the failure of the system was that people said, "I don't need to work hard. I don't need to study. I don't need to, because I'll just get promoted in my turn and I'll get the money associated with it." So they sat back and they were not great. Yeah, and I will say some of them were not great cops and some of them were not great people, but expected to
Hmm.
be promoted still. So when the system changed,
Yeah.
those people who were qualified, who were um, enthused and interested in actually gaining knowledge and experience, they still
Hmm.
got promoted in exactly the same way.
So after you went back to your normal rank after that, I guess for a little while you're doing your normal job. Did you eventually move your way up, or did you eventually just say, you know what, I want to do something different and move on to something else?
Well, as I say, I went into the police department not completely enthused about being a police officer, not as passionate as other people. And there was a period there where I got bored, and I started, and this tells you how long ago it was. I was looking through the newspaper at the job ads. There was no Seek, there was no online. It was looking through the newspaper because I was bored and I wanted some greater interest, something that drove my passion. And people within the police force were saying, "Why don't you become a detective? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" And somebody said, "Why don't you join Star Group?" And I've gone, "Do you know something? Star Group, they're always up for a challenge. They're outdoors. It's very physically active." And I thought to myself, well, it sounds interesting. So maybe it'll be enough to keep me interested and I'll enjoy myself in that environment while I'm still looking for what I want to do. And so I hadn't even gone for the next level of promotion. But I've joined Star Group. And when I joined Star Group, that was my passion. I absolutely loved that environment. I became the person that I needed to be. It was physically active, very academic as well, because we had to learn tactics and all that sort of stuff and know the legislation even higher than the average person. In fact, to get to Star Group, you had to be performing at the highest levels of policing before they'd even consider your application. But it was just an awesome place. We had all the boys' toys you could ever ask for. We had planes, we had
Mhm.
helicopters, we had boats, we had weapons, we had abseiling and jumping out of the helicopters and diving, and absolutely sensational. There are a few inherent risks in that environment, but generally it was
Mhm.
just good fun.
Exactly. And for those of people that are not familiar with Star Group in Australia, stands for, of course, Special Task and Rescue Group. And I think when you and I talked before, you kind of told me it was like in the medium kind of mixture of what the U.S. In the U.S. they would have a say the SWAT team on the police force and Navy SEALs kind of in between those, I guess, kind of doing things that both of them would do type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We combined the whole lot. So the SWAT team do high risk arrest and hostage siege situations, as well as some general patrolling. We combined diving as well. So the Navy SEALs component of it, and it was diving for recovery of evidence or recovery of drowned bodies, but also tactical diving at the counter-terrorist level as well. And so we have our own elite forces here. We call them the Special Air Services, or the SAS, which are the Australian equivalent to your Navy SEALs or Delta Force. And I trained with our SAS in counter-terrorism, and then brought those skills back to the police. So we didn't train to the intensity of the military, but we had the same skills and were expected to have the same abilities as they did. In fact, when the Queen came to visit Australia, we were the close quarter protection to the Queen while she was here as well.
Oh, okay. So, and what was your basically when you come into that type of group, are everybody sort of given certain jobs? Like this is what you're going to be more, um, this is going to be your thing, this is going to be your thing, or did you all basically do the same thing and you just went in as a group, or did you all have specialties to each person?
So everybody is cross trained in everything. So everybody was a driver, high intensity, highly trained driver. We were all able to do a certain level of bomb disposal or bomb recognition, and everybody was cross trained in tactics for entry and counterterrorism. But then you chose your own specialties, right? And then you had to apply and do separate courses. And so I became a sniper. Now, everybody could shoot extremely accurately, but obviously a sniper is just that little bit better and has different weapon. So I became a sniper, I became a diver, both a recovery diver and a tactical diver. And I went and trained with the SAS in counter-terrorism. So they were my three particular skills.
And and how long were you basically in with Star Group?
I served with Star Group for about 11 years, all up, out of a
Okay.
42-year policing career.
Okay. And so tell us a little bit about uh I guess it's in Star is when you you went into this little situation where basically what brought you here today. So I don't know if there's anything you want to lead up to it, or if you just want to get into it. I'm going to leave that up to you how you want to bring it in, or if there's anything else before that happened. Is there anything we should know um, about Star or your employment there before this happened, or you can go right into what happened?
Yeah, Star Group was just one of those places where um, we pretty much did our own thing, and as and that would be we didn't need to be a general duties patrol officer and respond to the same stuff that the general duties were doing. It was only when it became a higher level challenge that they asked us to come in and resolve the incident. So we were only called in when it became so big that the normal resources couldn't manage it. And so when we weren't actually on the job doing something, we were out training. Now, at that time, our police department would allow people to go out and train firearms once every 12 months, and you got about 40 bullets to train. So they were not extremely well trained, weren't very accurate. But in Star Group, we were resourced by the federal government, not just the state government. So we could train every day with a pistol if we wanted to. Now, everybody else had 40 bullets. We'd say, how many are we going to shoot today? Oh, maybe about half a bucket. So, you really had no idea, but we had basically unlimited resources to train. And we were training weapons, we were training abseiling, we were training rescues, we were training VIP security, we were training undercover, we were all this sort of stuff. And it was just this beautiful, intense environment. But we also had a ton of time to get fit as well. The fittest time I've ever had in my life. My resting heart rate at the time was 38. So, reasonably fit as we go. And even on the day that this incident happened where I was shot, I had ridden my bike to work 20 kilometres and, ridden very quickly and very intensely. So most people would be exhausted by the time, they finished that sort of ride at that intensity. But I rode to work. I then did an hour of fitness training at work, which is intense training as well. Then during work, there was a police basketball game, and we had an inter-section competition. So I then went and played basketball for an hour and a half. And then we got called to go to this job. And, I was fit enough to be able to do all those things and still be able to be at the peak of performance. It was just, fitness and my health was just absolute premium. But we got a call to say that this offender had failed to turn up in court. He was facing court on 197 counts of fraud. And he had failed to front court. The court had issued a warrant to arrest him. We knew his history. We knew there was a potential for this person to be extremely violent, but he hadn't actually been violent before. He'd made threats. He had intimidated people, even tried to make threats and intimidate police officers, but never acted on them. So he'd never been charged or found guilty of anything of violence, but we knew what his potential was. So they didn't ask the normal police officers to go and arrest him. They asked Star Group to come in with extra equipment and tactics and all the rest of it. We went to the house. We were in full police uniform, and we were wearing what we call flak vests. All the police call them flak vests. Your audience may know them more as bulletproof vests, but we call them flak vests for a reason, because I can tell you right now, they ain't bulletproof. They stop a certain type of bullet. They certainly stop a certain type of bullet, but not every bullet. And the bullet that this offender was using on the day went right through the soft body armor like a hot knife through butter. The weapon he was using was an SKK, which is a 308 or a 7.62 caliber, and he fired 18 times. But I'll get to that in just a moment. But we went there and we were wearing the flak vests and uniform. We knocked on the front door, and there was no answer. However, we knew he was inside. We had one of our other snipers sitting in the bush for about the last 20 minutes, watching the house, watching the offender. So we knew he was inside. We knocked again, we called again. But again, there was no answer. At this stage, I moved down the side of the house towards a glass sliding door. And as I got to within about 2 feet of that sliding door, all I wanted to do was check to see whether the door was open or unlocked, or whether there was any sort of barricading in behind it, so I could make an assessment as to whether we could use this as a better entry point where we could enter faster, safer, more efficiently, more effectively, rather than smashing our way with a battering ram through a wooden front door. But as I went to check out that door, I got to within about 2 feet of it. The offender spotted me, and he started shooting, and I was the target. And he fired 18 times, and he hit me 14 times with either bullets or shrapnel.
Wow. And now, how many different officers would have been with you on this situation?
There were 4 other Star Group police officers with me. Um, Three of us went to the house. One was the sniper, and we had one other police officer with us who was carrying a video camera. It's the first time any arrest, any police incident had actually been recorded on video. And I think this was the pre-runner to body-worn cams that we have these days.
Okay.
Because what happened on that day, you can now see either on my website or on YouTube. If you just Google Derrick McManus, shot 14 times, the video will come up. And you can see as I approach the house, you can hear the shooting, and then you'll hear me calling out, I'm hit, I'm hit. So, yes, there were four other Star Group officers, one other police officer with the camera, and we went to the house.
Okay. And again, like I told you before, sometimes I'll ask questions because I'm very ignorant on certain things. And I remember, and of course, Hollywood glamorizes everything, of course, makes everything look that much more glamorous and stuff. But I sometimes would see on some of those shows they have like equipment where they can see like infrared through walls for heat signatures, things like that. Is those things kind of really available that you could have used to try and see where the gentleman was, or was just I don't know what year was this kind of when this happened? What year was this roughly?
This was 1994, so all that technology came in uh, probably um, early 2000s through to about 2010, 2015. All that
Okay.
technology started being developed. So
So
we,
it was long before
as it
any of
was at
this
the
stuff was
time,
even thought
we
of.
had more resources than the average uh, part of the police department, and we had the best of the best at the time, and that's what we were using. But we didn't have any of that technology. In fact, we were
Okay.
just playing with thermal lances to be able to use as an entry tool. And thermal lances were extremely, extremely hot and able to cut through metal very quickly for the day. But it still took so long, and this was the best technology. We're going, this is the best technology. It's more dangerous sitting here with, but it was the start of new technology coming into these sorts of things.
Definitely. And I'll put a link to the video itself that people can go to your website to check it out
Yeah,
in this
sensational.
process. So you take a look in. He sees you. He reacts, of course, starts unloading 18 times. You get hit 14. You yell your hit. Where do you take us from there? What happens as you're hit 14 times? Obviously, you're on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I'm approaching that sliding door, I actually don't realize I'm getting shot. Time starts slowing down, and I don't feel the impact. I don't feel pain. I don't even hear the sound of gunfire. All I know is I am slowly falling to the ground, and I'm berating myself. I'm absolutely livid at being so stupid to fall at at this particular time. I'm highly trained. Why would I be falling? As I was falling, I saw these small round holes in the door that hadn't been there a moment before. And then I heard the sound of gunfire. So as I'm falling and berating myself and absolutely livid with myself, I started rationalizing I'm falling inexplicably. There's small round holes and there's the sound of gunfire, and I've rationalized I must be getting shot. And so the thought that I had before I even hit the ground was, Derek, don't be too hard on yourself, because if you're getting shot, it's quite acceptable to fall over. And that's exactly what I thought. Um, I fell to the ground and he's continuing to shoot. And I'm lying on my back, my head facing away, my feet pointing directly at where the bullets are coming from. And two bullets hit my left thigh. These two bullets, time slowed right down. These two bullets seemed to take about 30 seconds to hit me, have their effect, and time to move on. The first one hit me and it felt like a sledgehammer, absolutely driving into my thigh. But all I felt was the impact, not the pain, right? Even though it felt like a sledgehammer, there was no pain associated with it. But this is part of the volley of 18 bullets fired in less than 5 seconds. I felt the impact of that first bullet hit my leg, and then I felt the shock wave going slowly up through my body, all the way to the top of the head, and then the shock wave came back down through my body, back down to that point of impact. And then a second bullet hit, and I felt that individual impact, shock wave up, shock wave back down. And again, seemingly 30 seconds for this to happen to me. And in this seemingly 30-second period, I started thinking to myself, Derrick, you're an idiot. How can you possibly lie here for so long and just accept being shot without doing something to return fire? Now, I couldn't see him inside. It was dark inside the house. The sun was behind me, so there was a reflection off the window. I couldn't see in. There were curtains behind that, and but I could hear the sound of where the bullets are coming from. So I resigned myself that I just need to fire in the direction of where those bullets are coming from. And I consciously wanted to fire just 6 or 7 times because I couldn't see him. I just wanted to give him something to worry about so that he'd stop shooting at me. And I wanted to retain as many bullets as I could so that if he comes out later, I could still shoot him. In the video analysis afterwards, and for anybody who goes and watches it, you'll hear him shooting, then you'll hear me shooting back, and then you'll hear him shooting again. The video analysis shows that I didn't fire 6 or 7 times. I fired 13 times. So I just got a little bit excited at that point. But when I fired back, he did stop, and that's exactly what I wanted. I couldn't see him, but I hit a brick right next to his head, and he got a little bit of shrapnel in his head. And there's another bullet that went across his back and just left a line across his back. Nobody knows who fired it or when it was fired, but I'm claiming it. So it makes me feel good.
With what you went through, you're allowed to claim
it. But in that rationalizing that I need to fire back, what I did was I realized that I was firing back along the length of my body. And before I pulled the trigger on that first bullet and return fire, I realized that firing back along the length of my body, at the other end of my body are my feet. And when you're lying on your back, your feet point up in the air. So I knew I needed to get up just that little bit to shoot over the top of my feet. But I've got a flak vest on, I've got weaponry equipment, and so my upper body is much heavier than my lower body. And as I've lifted my upper body up, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And the thought that ran through my head was, I better not shoot myself in the foot because the guys at work will give me shit for the rest of my life. And that's literally what I thought. I don't embellish that in any way. And a lot of people say, how could you possibly be thinking that way, that rationally, that calmly, in the midst of being shot 14 times? And what it comes down to, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is that I had prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter. And this goes back to intuitive knowledge. It's not the stuff that we know rationally. It's not the stuff that we've always been trained, but we pick up a lot of skills in life that we just don't realize. 5 years prior to the shooting, I'd had a conversation with my wife, and I said, I'm going into star group, so there's a very real chance I may be shot and injured. I may be shot and killed. This is reality of life, and we need to talk about it because I want to know that you support me going in there and you understand what those risks are as well, so that if anything happens, you are reasonably well prepared. And so we spoke about it, and I said to her, if I die, what's your life going to look like? Because it's not just about us, it's about our families, our teams, how they're impacted by our thoughts, actions, choices. And we considered 3 things for her. She could go on and get married and have somebody else look after the children. She could stay single. Now, my emphasis was not to say, I prefer this or this. My emphasis was, I want you to do whatever you think is right for you. Worst thing that I could possibly imagine is that I die, and then she starts wondering, what would have Derrick wanted? And if I go this way, how will Derrick's family judge me? How will my family judge me? So I wanted absolute clarity that I supported whatever she wanted to do so that she could go through life quite comfortably. But I did throw her 3 options so she could stay single and look after the children. She could get married and have someone help her look after the children, have more children, whatever it might be. But the third option was she could build a little shrine in the corner and just worship me every day. I did throw that to her, but apparently it wasn't all that popular. Who knows?
No, that never flies when we say stuff like that to our wives. I'm sure it doesn't fly a lot. So I'm glad that you had that conversation with her too, because people don't realize when you see a police officer, when you see an army or navy or something going off overseas and things like that, you think about is them, and oh well, they know what they're doing, they know what the risks were when they went in, blah blah. They don't talk about the families, because these people have families. People forget that they have families sometimes, and how is this going to affect them? And even like something like this where and we'll get into it of course after any of your after effects and that, but if you were shot and say you were paralyzed from the neck down or things like that, these are things that it can be a burden on the family too, and you gotta, it's good that you have a conversation with your wife about stuff like this. A lot of people probably wouldn't. They would just say, "This is what I'm doing. This is, you knew what I was getting into when you married me," and blah 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 blah. So you'll just have to deal with it, type of thing. But you look like you had a very good heart-to-heart conversation with her and said, "Listen, these are the possibilities, and reality. This is what could happen." And then all of a sudden, boom, this does happen. Now you were saying that how you got the two shots in your thigh there, and you were shooting back. Now, the other 12 bullets that you got hit, were they just all upper body in the chest? Did you get hit anywhere else in the legs? Or like you're lying there now, and I guess those two shots in the thigh were the last two, I guess, that you got hit with.
Um, I'm presuming they're the last two. I can't tell you exactly what bullet hit me where because the other
Mm,
12 I don't know. I didn't feel them
okay.
hitting me. I didn't feel any pain associated with them. But I presume as well that those two bullets in the thigh were the last ones. I was hit once in the chest, but part of my flak vest was a ceramic plate, which just sits on the chest, covers the heart lung area. So there was one bullet that hit that ceramic plate. The ceramic plate could stop this sort of weapon. So if it wasn't for that plate, I would have been hitting the heart chest area and the bullet would have gone in. Things probably would have turned out very differently. There
Yeah.
was two bullets that hit me in the stomach. Body armor couldn't stop that because the plate wasn't that low. I lost 15 centimeters of large intestine and 30 centimeters of small intestine. And for the 3 hours I was lying on the ground, that was the bile from my stomach was just emptying into the stomach cavity. I was hit twice in the left thigh. I was hit once in the left forearm, and that bullet hit the radius in the forearm and severed the radial artery. That artery was severed while I was lying on the ground for 3 hours. A piece of shrapnel lodged in my right wrist and severed the ulnar artery. And again, lying on the ground for 3 hours with a severed ulnar artery and a radial artery in the other forearm. Uh, there were two bullets in my left thigh. They missed the femoral artery by the width of a piece of paper. And we all know
Mm,
that any artery being severed, you should die within 3-4 minutes. But the femoral artery is a particularly big artery. So very fortunate that that one wasn't hit. Three bullets or bits of shrapnel just skipped across the back of my left calf. One bullet went through my right Achilles tendon, took out 80% of my Achilles for about an inch, inch and a half. Another bullet or bit of shrapnel went through my behind my right knee, needed half a dozen stitches to fix that one up. And there were another two bullets that hit pieces of equipment that didn't penetrate into my body. One of them hit a magazine on my left thigh. So we had drop pouches and ammo down on our thigh so that we could access them very, very quickly. One bullet hit directly into one of the magazines for my pistol and stopped a third penetration into my thigh. And the last bullet hit an area of our flak vest, which is called the groin flap. It just pulls down to protect the femoral arteries and all that other equipment down there. And I'm very happy to say that groin flap stopped that bullet, and there was no damage as a result of that bullet.
good.
So, yeah, very, 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 very happy about that one. Um, but yeah, the only two bullets I felt hitting me were those two bullets in my left thigh. The rest, I don't know when they hit me or what order.
Okay. And then so you're laying there, you fired back, he's fired back. Um, you don't know if you've hit him or not. You told us before, like they found bullets of one that went by his back and one into the brick, but at this time you don't know that. You just firing into the area. What happens from there? Because you're laying there, you say, for 3 hours. So in that 3 hours, um, what happens in a way that nobody can come and retrieve you in that time that they can come and just pull you away. Obviously, he's still barricaded in there, and they don't know where he is. What
So,
happens in that time between you getting shot and 3 hours later when they finally get you?
I shoot back at him. He stops. I then roll a couple of times, and he fires again. Where those bullets went, I have no idea. Despite all of my injuries, I managed to get to my feet. Now, doctors are surprised that I'm able to get to my feet, let alone walk, but I staggered around the corner of the house, and I was looking for somewhere safe to hide. My mates couldn't come to me because of what he was doing. They didn't realize I was hit straight away, because when they heard the sound of gunfire, and you'll see this on the video, as soon as they hear the sound of gunfire, and I start smiling every time I think about this, you see the sergeant knocking on the door. He hears some gunfire. You can see the look on his face. Oh, that's not good. He moves back behind a brick pillar for safety, and you can see him just look along the line of the wall. Nobody says anything, but instantly everybody moves together because they know this is not a safe place to be. This is not where we want to be. It's once they start moving that you then hear me calling out, I'm hit, I'm hit. And so they've moved, and they're now in no man's land when they hear me calling out, I'm hit, I'm hit. So they commit to getting somewhere safe before they stop. They get some cover. And then they start calling out to me, Derrick, where are you? I couldn't hear it. The video shows it, but I couldn't hear it. And this is another great value of the video, so that we know what was going on. And I feel very comfortable that what they did was the right thing. Two of them went around the guy with the video camera and one of the starries went around behind a shed. Now, the shed did not offer them protection, but it offered them concealment. He couldn't see them while they're standing there. However, he saw them run in behind there. And so he started shooting through that shed, trying to shoot them. And they say that the bullets came one side of them, the bullets came in between them, by their legs, and it was only sheer good luck that they didn't get hit. They left there immediately and then went and found more protection behind a concrete and brick shed further out on the property. But because of what he was doing and how he was doing it, and I won't go into the tactics, even though if we were sitting down over coffee, I'd tell you every little detail, without telling you the sensitive details of the tactics of Star Group, but I tell you all the details of what was happening for them. They felt it was unsafe for them to come back. The sergeant, we've had many conversations afterwards. He was so frustrated that he couldn't get back into me. He wanted to try everything, but it was just too dangerous. And that sits very comfortably with me. So they've moved out. They couldn't get back to me. I'm staggering around the corner of the house, trail of blood behind me. I've called out, I'm hit, I'm hit. And I'd only got about 7 or 8 meters, staggering, and my injuries overcame me. The pain, the loss of blood, the shock, and I dropped back to my knees. And I crawled along on my knees for about 2 or 3 meters. Body got weaker again almost instantly, and I dropped to my hands and knees. And I just dragged myself along on my hands and knees for 2 or 3 meters. And then I dropped to the ground, I roll onto my back, and that's where I stay for about the next 3 hours. Now, during this time of staggering around here, my thought process is still very clear, and I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly what I want to do, and it's very pragmatic. But when I drop to the ground and I roll onto my back and I know there's nothing more I can do for myself other than wait for my mates to come and get me, my mind goes into panic. And when our mind goes into panic, we are in fight and flight, and we don't think of the smart stuff, we think of the dumb stuff. And all I wanted to do in this panic mode was work out how I can turn time back, and then not do the same stuff again, but then come forward and not be in the position I am now. But then he starts shooting through bricks in the wall, and the dust started falling into my eyes. And when the dust was falling into my eyes, I very quickly realized I need to get a grip of myself and I need to face reality. I can't turn time back. And I remember consciously thinking this: I can't turn time back. I need to focus on what I can control now if I'm going to have any chance of surviving and certainly thriving in the future. I need to make myself
Mhm.
focus and take conscious control. And there were four things that I knew I needed to do. And the first one was control panic, not let panic take control of the situation. I needed to control shock, the body's physiological response to either physical or psychological trauma. And this is important for your listeners. It's not just physical trauma where we go into fight and flight. It's the psychological, the emotional trauma when things are going out of control and we don't know how to manage it, either in our relationships, in our business, with our children. Once we start getting overwhelmed, we go into fight and flight mode, and the body reroutes blood around the body and away from the brain and into the fight and flight. And we're not able to do that higher level thinking. We're not able to do the planning. We're not able to do the creativity because the brain still has enough blood to function, but not at the higher level. So I knew that I had to control my physiology and control that shock. I needed to slow down my heart rate and I needed to slow down my breathing. Now, people have asked me, how did you work all that out when you're under so much pressure? I didn't work it out when I was under pressure. I worked it out 5 years before when I had that conversation with my wife. And I said, if I get shot and injured, the reality is I may be shot and I die, or I may be shot. And one of the things that I said to her was exactly as you described before: I may be not able to function from the neck down, and I may spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. But the conversation with her at that time was, I know what the risks are, and I still want to do this. The risks are so
Mhm.
low that I have a good sense that I will be able to manage them, or there's nothing going to happen, because that's how most people think. Probably not going to happen. It's not going to happen to me or happen to somebody else. But I consciously said to her, it could happen to me. It may not,
Mhm.
possibly not, but it could. And if it does happen, and the thing I said to her is, if I spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, I want you to know right now, 5 years before the shooting, anything better than death is a bonus to me. So long as I am able to
Yeah.
interact with my kids, anything
Mhm.
better than death is a bonus. And this is what people need to do when we go into any situation, whether it's going into a new relationship, going into a new job, a new sport. What are the risks that are associated with it? Because we all see the great shiny
Yeah.
stuff, and that's what I want to do this for. But there's always a double-edged sword. There's always the other side as well. Um, and I talk about having open, honest, confronting conversations about the reality of both ends of that spectrum. And by doing that, I'd already known that I needed to do those four things if I did get shot.
Yeah.
And it took a little while for them to kick in because there wasn't an emotional overwhelm. And then I've gone, do you know something? I do need to be able to control my emotion and bring them back down. So there were certain things that I did to be able to do that.
Exactly. And then you got adrenaline going too, and that's trying to help you get through it too. You're just basically going on adrenaline by then.
Absolutely. Yep. Adrenaline kicked in. Um, and the doctors cannot explain to me why I didn't feel pain. Um, they
Yeah.
have lots of possible reasons, but they're not able to
Mhm.
definitively say this is the reason. But I wasn't feeling pain. Not the pain that you would expect. It wasn't a searing, burning, excruciating, screaming pain. It felt like somebody had punched me in the stomach, and it felt like I had a dead leg from playing sport. You know, somebody's hit you in the
Mhm.
side of the leg and you get the dead leg. That's what it felt like. There was no pain in my Achilles tendon. I didn't even realize that was hit. My forearm, I was looking at my forearm for the entire 3 hours I was on the ground, and I could see bones sticking out and blood seeping out of it, but no pain.
But no pain. Um, so after all this, I mean, you're laying there, and like you said, it's for 3 hours. How do they finally get this to come to a conclusion and are able to come and get you?
So the guys that I was with were pinned down. They couldn't do anything. They had to call for backup, and we were three-quarters of an hour out of the main city at that time. Our backup were out training, and they were equally the opposite direction from the main city. So they had to regroup, rekit, get back to base, and then come out to see us. So I was on the ground for 3 hours waiting for backup to get there. And they did everything they could to get there as quickly as they could. They were only on the ground for about 10 minutes and formulated a plan. Part of the briefing for this plan was we don't know whether Derrick's dead or alive. We haven't heard from him for 3 hours. You may be going in to pick up a body. The shooter is still shooting, and there's a very good chance you may be shot and injured and may be shot and killed. Part of that briefing was if you just get shot and injured, please stay close to the truck. That'll make it easy for us to get you out. Big ask, I think, but that was part of the briefing. And so there was a very clear knowledge that they didn't have perfect protection and they were risking their lives to come in to find out whether I was alive or not and to rescue me. So extremely brave actions on their behalf. They really are heroes. They came in under fire. They got to me. They picked me up. I was passing in and out of consciousness by this time because I just didn't have enough blood left in my body. In fact, I was fully conscious for the 3 hours I was there, except for the last 15 minutes. I was passing in and out of consciousness, but I was monitoring my body closing down. Not going into panic mode, but I could feel my legs closing down. I felt my arms closing down, knowing that the body naturally reroutes blood away from the peripheries when it starts getting low and into the core. So it's just going kidneys, lungs, heart, and brain. And at one time, blood supply got so low that even my vision had closed down. And all I saw was an absolute pristine white. But then I heard the boys coming, and again, there was that dump of adrenaline into the body. Vision kicked back up. One of the guys that got to me, he'd told me just recently, we were having a conversation about it, and he said, Derrick, do you know something? When I got you, I knew it was you. Absolutely no doubt about it. I knew it was you, but I didn't recognize you. Your look was so different because you had no blood. There was no pigmentation color in my skin. It was all just ashen gray, and my nose looked exactly as my cheeks. You couldn't tell my lips. So it was fairly confronting for them as well as confronting for me, obviously. But they got me out and they got me to the doctor, and the first doctor to get to me said he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. We've had a conversation since then, and he's actually said on a news report, all the textbooks say that Derrick's condition says that he should have died. The only reason Derrick didn't die is he didn't read the textbooks that told him he should have died. So being undereducated is sometimes a good thing.
There you go.
But essentially what that means is I defied medical knowledge. They do not they can't explain why the artery didn't bleed profusely. It just closed off at either end. Now, not the only person this happens to. Occasionally, it does happen to other people as well. So I'm no Superman or Miracle Man, but they can't explain why it didn't just bleed this severed artery. The one on my right wrist, that didn't bleed because the piece of shrapnel stayed in there. But I got to the doctor, and the doctor and his team treated me for 10 minutes in direct line of fire. They made a decision that if they tried to move me any further, then I would have died. So for 10 minutes, they treated me, they stabilized me in direct line of fire, bullets whizzing around their ears. So any one of them could have been injured or killed at that time. Again, extreme bravery, unbelievable bravery. But one of my mates from Star Group walked up to Dr. Bill Griggs, and he said to him, listen, don't worry about the shooter. Don't worry about the bullets. I'm going to stand between you and the shooter, and if the bullets come this way, I've got a flak vest on, so I'm going to be all right, and so will you. So you just focus on Derrick. Again, extreme bravery. Bill Griggs, just a little aside, he told me later that this guy's walked up to him and he said, I've got a flak vest on, I'm going to be all right. He looked at this guy's flak vest, and then he looked at my flak vest, which is full of holes. He said, I saw a little bit of irony there, but I didn't actually say anything to him.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking that myself as you said that, because I'm thinking you had the same flat vest on and it didn't seem to help you as so much. So,
No,
but it
it
does,
does.
like you said, show that bravery that you guys have to have in a situation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was Star Group that was showing that bravery there. But for the 3 hours that I was lying on the ground, that they couldn't get to me, my other mates on general duties have been having, and this is stories they've told me afterwards, they were having arguments with their sergeants, saying they can't get him out. I want to go there. I want to be able to go and do something. I want to be able to get him out. I will go in. And they were willing to drive 500 kilometers, which is about 380 miles, just to
Mhm.
come up and get in and get to me. So it's not just Star Group and those special forces that back each other up. Entire police department. I have absolute faith everybody would have wanted to do the best they could in that situation. When the boys didn't come to get me because they were under fire, if you can get your head around this, if I died and come back and done a review, I still would have said that was the smartest decision they made, even though I died and come back and done
Mhm.
a review. So it sits very comfortably with me. They were doing what they needed to do. And if they could have got in, they would have got in.
Exactly. And one thing, just going back quickly, because then we'll
Yeah.
move on, of course. But one thing that just came to my mind is during that whole time, that 3 hours, you finally get yourself into a situation, like you said, where you moved yourself to the corner, you fell down. You're in a situation where you're not getting fired at yourself much anymore. You're laying there for 3 hours, wondering if you're going to die or not. Is there any radio contact between you and them in that whole time? Like, is this, or is it the type of thing that they, after 2.5 hours, closer to 3 hours, they're like, you know what, we got to go get at least his body, but he might not be alive by the time we get there? Or is it just silence on the radio between you and them?
Okay, you can see me smiling, and I'm smiling wryly uh, because this is the little voice of doubt inside my head playing up again. Um, one of the things that I did when I was in Star Group was start playing with, and it shows you again how early technology we were playing with at the time. There was no voice operated activity or radios at that time. We had a radio on our hip, and to hear the radio, we turned it up loud so that we could hear it, but obviously offenders could hear it as well. So I got approached by one of the guys in radio section who wanted to play with having a boom microphone, a headset, and a boom microphone. So all the only person who could hear the radio was me. And then we
Mhm.
started playing with voice activated uh, boom microphone, and so as we were testing this over months and months, every time we go for a break when we're out training, I go, "Hey, listen, I want to test the radio in this environment." And all my mates are going, "Oh, Derrick, testing the bloody radio again." And, you know, so I never went anywhere without my radio. But on the day of the shooting, I had a new partner in the car, and he wasn't used to my system. So my system was very, very regimented. When I pulled up to an incident like this, my radio, because when you're sitting in the car, you can't have it on your hips because you're so wide and the car seats will only take so much. So my radio sat there, my baton sat there, and as I pulled up to any incident, I would turn the car off, clip the keys onto my belt, grab my radio, put my radio on as I'm stepping out of the car. And if I had to grab my baton, I could then grab my baton as well. It was a very fluid motion. And so we've pulled up to this incident, and I've started going through the process. And my partner's looked at it and gone, "Your radio's still on center console." And I knew exactly what I was doing, but he's gone, "Derrick, aren't you going to take your radio?" And the little voice inside my head goes, "Oh, guys are always giving me a hard time about my radio." I said, "No, I won't need it today." You know,
Oh,
stupidity, because I had this chip on my shoulder. They always make fun of me. I've got to have your radio. You're always playing with your radio. So I left my radio in the car and I didn't have it with me that day. And so there was absolutely no communication between them and I at the time.
oh, wow. And that's something I didn't even know. People are gonna probably think I set that up for that answer, and I didn't. I didn't know that you didn't have your radio on yet. I just happened to think about that. In that 3 hours, are you guys talking back and forth, or so that just shows that they didn't know if you were alive or dead by the time they were going to get to you, because they all they heard was you screaming out at the one time, but then after that it was probably silence because you're not screaming by that time. And so
No,
they didn't know what they were coming into, I'm sure.
absolutely, they had no idea at all. Now, I actually scream out 3 times. They only hear the one time of me calling out, I'm hit, because, and that's on the video as well. But I scream out 3 times. I call out, I'm hit, I'm hit. I go around the corner of the house and I call out, I'm hit, I'm hurt, and I need help. Just so that there was absolute clarity. Everybody knew I'm still alive, but I do need help. They were so far away they couldn't hear it. But I know that the offender
Mm,
inside could hear it. So I've then gone around the corner and collapsed to my knees and collapsed to my hands and knees and collapsed to the ground. And as soon as I hit the ground, I go, I am completely useless here. If he comes out, I am just an easy target. I still had my pistol in my hand, but I
yeah,
just thought there's nothing I can do. I can't run away. I can't be tactical. And so the thought that ran through my mind, and this is those 4 things kicked in. I was able to bring my emotions down and my rational thinking back up because I went out of panic mode. And the thought that ran through my head is, he knows that I'm useless, that I need help. So I called out, I'm hit. And this was as loud as I could. And it was for no other benefit than his. I'm hit, I'm hurt, but I can still shoot. And this was, blood was flowing back to that frontal lobe where I started doing high
yeah,
level thinking, problem solving, creativity. And that's one of the bonuses of being able to calm ourselves and be rational in the midst of massive adversity. We can get that creativity.
exactly.
When I called out, I'm hit, I'm hurt, but I can still shoot, I know he would have heard it because there was no gunfire at the time. So he would have heard it. And
Yeah,
I'm just hoping that played on his psychology. Okay, he's still rational enough. No, he can
gotcha.
still shoot. So, yeah, I won't go out and risk my life.
No, it's good that, and that just shows all the training you guys go through. Because I'm sure there's a lot of these recruits that get into the academy there, and they're like, "Oh my God, they're telling us all these things, and it's never going to happen." And you're a life story that, like, you can say that all you want, but I know what happens when I'm there and what you got to do. So I'm glad that that worked out. You got out of there. Now you're
I'm
gone. I
going to
guess
pick up.
back
I'm
now
going to
you're
pick
down
up
to.
on that.
Oh, go
If
for
I
it.
can
Go for
just
it.
pick,
Go for
yeah,
it.
yeah, I'll pick up on that. Yeah, I am the living proof that it is different. And there are a lot of police officers who go, listen, if you get shot, you are going to die. There is a real possibility you'll die. And if you get shot once, you will probably die. And I just put my hand and go, I kind of dispute that. And they go, oh, damn, yeah, okay. But it's good to know.
Yeah. Who
Just
brought
being
him in
shot
here,
does not
anyways?
mean, yeah, that's right. Being shot does not mean you are going to die. Yes, the possibility is definitely there, but it doesn't mean you are. And controlling our mind to control our body, mind over matter is a real thing.
Hmm. And we've talked about this in plenty of my other podcasts too, about how much the mind plays on a body, not only in just your situation where it helped you by using that, your brain, sometimes it just causes even more stress because your brain has so much power over your body in negative ways and in
Absolutely.
positive ways. You were able to use it in a positive way, which is the way that we all hopefully when we're in a situation we can do, and it's not easy to do. So it just goes by the training you had, and I'm glad you were able to get through that. So um, so this is all done now. You're shot. They finally get to you. They're working on you. I guess you get taken to the hospital then, and take us through now because I'm sure now your family's getting notified eventually. And so take us now the post after this is all done. You're in the hospital. Did you go right in for operation right away? I guess they don't know if you're going to survive. Like, take us through the whole process there. I know we don't have too much time left, but let's try and see how much we can get in there.
Okay, so very, very quickly. I was on the ground for 3 hours. My wife got told at 2 hours, and she was told,
Mm,
um, is on the ground. We haven't heard from it. It doesn't look good. So basically, they're preparing her for I'm possibly dead. They get to me, they throw me into a helicopter, and they start flying me into the hospital. And she is told, Derek's alive. We're going to get you down to the hospital so you can see him. So the helicopter's coming from one direction, she's coming from the other direction. I get into the hospital, but I'm not conscious at the time that she gets to me.
mm,
So she's able to see me, but not talk to me. I get 7 hours of surgery. 24 units of blood. So anybody who knows anything about blood, body only holds 10 units. I had 24 units of blood in that 7 hour period. Um, I've gone into intensive care, and it's taken me probably 36 hours before I actually wake up in intensive care. And, you know, intensive care, all these sorts of monitors going beep and all the rest of it. But even in intensive care, the moment I wake up, I go straight back into light-hearted, relaxed mode while still being very serious and being able to manage everything and not denying anything or overwhelmed. But I'm able to go straight back into relaxed mode because I'd already said anything better than death is going to be a bonus. And this is bonus time for me. So I was able to go straight into relaxed mode. The first thing that I did said when I woke up, and then acknowledged there was massive pain. My rehabilitation took 2.5 years. And that's 2.5 years of highs, lows, tears, fears, doubts, successes, failures, regression, advance. It was a massive roller coaster. And my marriage went through some very big challenges at that time as well. My marriage broke up 2 years after the shooting. And it's not because of the shooting, but the shooting was a catalyst to make me start analyzing my happiness a little bit more. My wife and I are still good friends now, but it just wasn't a good marriage. So I decided to leave it. 2.5 years after the shooting, I made a return to Star Group on full duties with no restrictions. Now, I've still only got 20%
Wow.
of the thickness of my Achilles tendon. I've got 30% of the muscle missing from my left thigh. I've got injuries to my stomach that even today, sometimes when I'm doing sit-ups, the scar tissue inside just spasms and grabs my stomach. And I really have to tug myself in pain to stretch it again. My left forearm is less effective than my right forearm. I've got all these injuries and impairments, but I don't have the disabilities that are associated with it normally. People say, well, you should be on disability for this. And I've gone, why should I be on disability? I am fully functional, even though there's a couple of things that aren't working quite properly. Now, people sometimes have that naturally, or they're not as good as someone else. We all have our impairments. It's about finding out what we can do, not what we can't do, and just accepting it and working it around. So 2.5 years after the shooting, I went back to work. But the more amazing thing for me anyway, and for most people, is that I didn't get any PTSD, anxiety, stress, depression as a result of the shooting. Now, I've been lying on the ground for 3 hours, monitoring my body closing down. I saw the white light, and I certainly started asking myself, is this white light associated with a higher power? I don't have a religious background, but it was my instant go-to. I'm going, is this what
Mhm.
they talk about? But that's when I start fighting my hardest. Um, and I've now got 2.5 years of rehabilitation in front of me. Doubts as to whether I'll walk properly. The doctor said I should never walk properly. And this is what I was dealing
Mhm.
with in this initial stages. I shouldn't have survived surgery. Even after surgery, I was a 50-50 chance of dying through complications and septicemia and all those things. Um, and I certainly had a nightmare. I had flashbacks. I had panic attacks, but they didn't last the clinical length of time for it to be classed as PTSD because I'd
Mhm.
already worked through in my mind. I anticipated if I get shot, I can expect I'll probably have some nightmares. There will be times where I have flashbacks. That it's all possible. It doesn't mean I'm weak. It actually means I'm normal. And by being able to
Mhm.
say I'm normal and this is, what everybody goes through or everybody can go through, I was then able to be more proactive about managing it. And so within 5 days of the shooting, I've thrown my hand in there and said, get me a psych. I want to talk to a psych. Now, remember, this is 30 years ago when real men, and I say this inverted commas for anybody that isn't watching and just listening, inverted commas, real men, tough men, didn't have psychological issues. We didn't go and get therapy because we were too tough for it. For whatever reason, nobody had ever explained it to me. My parents hadn't discussed it with me, but I knew that I needed to talk to this psych. And again, it was just what I said before. I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter with the shooting, and it worked out well for me. I didn't do it consciously, but I wanted to talk to the psych because I wanted to pick his brain about what's normal from this point forward. I know people have nightmares, flashbacks, triggers, all these sorts of things. If it happens to me, who's managed it well? Who's managed it badly? What will I be able to do for myself? The psych picked my brain and I picked his brain. And after about 3 hours, the psych said, Derrick, psychologically, you can go back to work tomorrow. You don't need to even have any ongoing therapy. And so psychologically, I was prepared to go back to work. It took me 2.5 years physically, but psychologically, emotionally, I was cleared, and I've never had any PTSD or stress or depression in relation to this. And this is what I talk about these days when I speak at corporate functions or whatever it might be. It's about how do we prepare our minds to deal with the challenges that we're going to go through. They've worked out exceptionally well for me, and the models that I have work out exceptionally for kids in schools at 10 years old, corporates, hairdressers, fighter pilots, CEOs. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I've now been able to conceptualize it and make it a universal philosophy and a universal process.
And how much longer, like you said, 2.5 years later, you physically in that were back in Star. How much longer did you stay in Star?
I stayed in Star, so I'd been in Star for 5 years at the time I got shot. It took me 2.5 years to get back in there, and another 3 years of service within Star. And some of that service was certainly seconded out to other places for my development and advancement and those sorts of things. But I went back fully operational and served with them for about 5.5 years after the shooting. Sorry, 6 years after the shooting. And then I went and chased promotion and development for myself after that. And I stayed in the police
Okay.
force.
And are you still part?
No, I've retired now. I'm actually that old. I retired. So I retired in 2018.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say there that I think you were going to carry on with your thought there, but stayed there for 6 more years, and then you went for promotion and stuff, and then.
Yeah, no, you actually anticipated what I was going to say and asked a question about it. So, yeah, I stayed until
Oh, okay.
2018 and retired.
Good for you. Good for you. You deserve it. Believe me, you deserve retirement. I thank you for everything you've done. And anybody
Thank you.
that's done any kind of work that you do that for protecting the rest of us and that. And so now going after that, you retire. What are you doing now? Because I'm on your website, and if I'm not mistaken, you're into coaching now and speaking engagements and things like that.
Yes, I speak at conferences all around the world. I've been very, very fortunate. I speak at conferences and I talk about essentially it's inspirational, but it's very, very pragmatic and practical about how you can take the inspiration and work it into your life, no matter who you are, no matter what job you do. It is a universal philosophy. And what I talk about is human durability. Resilience is being able to bounce back. Human durability, as I've conceptualized it, is our ability to sustain optimal performance. In Star Group, we're expected to perform at 100% peak performance all the time. When I got shot, if I'd tried to sustain peak, I would have died. So it's about what's the very best we can possibly do in the circumstances we find ourselves as a result of the choices we've made or the way things have turned out. What's the very best you can expect of yourself, and not berating yourself and not being angry with yourself because you're not performing at peak. Understand what's the best you can do. So if in normal life we're trying to be good at business, but there's things happening in our marriage, or we've got a pet that's going to the vet because it's extremely sick, or we've got financial pressures, we can't be great at work while we've got all these things happening. And while we've got all these things happening here, if something is really bad at work, that's going to impact on these other things as well. So it's understanding and being compassionate to yourself while still being fully pragmatic and practical about getting the very best you can do in those given circumstances. And so I get to open conferences, I close conferences. I've had a 4,000 person audience in Singapore. One company made me go to Fiji with them, made me stay in a 6-star resort for a week with them. It was pressure. But I also run workshops these days. So it's not just an inspirational talk, it's a very pragmatic process. And I've developed all my own models. And the University of South Australia School of Psychology are engaging with me, and they want to help me develop it and make it something that is taken to mainstream and possibly part of a university degree.
Wow. I think the one thing when I first started this podcast was I was trying to think of what is a great way to get out to people in just one sentence of what I want this whole thing to govern. And I came up with three words: empower, motivate, and inspire. To me, that's what everybody needs, especially in the last 4 years with everything that's gone on in this world. Mental health issues, as you know, is just to skyrocket. And like you said, back in the 80s and 90s, nobody talked about it. It was a stigma. If you have a mental health issue, you're going to a hospital because you don't talk about stuff like that. And I'm glad it's more to the forefront. And if anybody listening to this podcast today is not either motivated, inspired, or empowered from hearing your story, I don't know what else will inspire them or motivate them, because here's a gentleman that is in a situation where there's no logical reason you should still be here with us with everything you went through in those 4 hours or whatever it was, the 3 hours plus the time um, during the whole beginning part of it. And yet you're still not only here, but you're here to talk about it. You're here to motivate people. And you're here very gracious too, because most people will be, like you said, feeling sorry for themselves, or with the way your wrist is and your thigh is and things like that. You're not 100%, but you don't let it set you back. You don't let it hold you back. You're telling people, no, doesn't matter what your disability is, learn how to use it and move on. And I think I'm learning a lot today just talking to you, and very inspired by your story. So before we leave here today, maybe give us some last words, one last set of last words that if you can say anything to anybody watching or listening to this online, what is some of your last words you'd like to inspire them with and motivate them with, and just to leave the episode with?
So, part of my human durability is I talk about 5 drivers for success. These 5 drivers I needed at the time when I was shot, but I realized they impact on everything that I do, and they're the basis that I taught to 10-year-old kids and adults as well. The 5 drivers for success. The first one is optimism. Optimism is different from hope. Hope is passive, and we're just sitting around hoping that something will happen. Optimism is hope with a plan. It is hope on steroids. And optimism is that we believe that there is something better than where we are right now. When I was shot, where I am right now was terrible. The future is not perfect, but anywhere better than what I am is what I was optimistic about. And that one sense of optimism was being able to get back to my children and being able to interact with them. That's what I said 5 years ago. That's what I held on to. So having that reason to be optimistic about the future, there is something better than where I am now. It may not be perfect, but I want to drive for it. Number 2 is believing in our ability to influence it. We may not be able to influence everything in the world, but we can influence how things affect us physically and mentally. And when we can remain in control of our physical and our mental impact on ourselves, then we can influence our lives as well. We've got to have meaning in our life, right? There's got to be a reason why we're doing it. For me, getting through the shooting, my meaning was to be able to get back to my children and enjoy life. And once I started being able to do that well, the meaning for me became being that example to my children, that we all go through tough stuff in our lives, whether it's physically, whether it's business, whether we go through some tough stuff, I will find a way to work through it. And so that's what the meaning has been for me. And now in my business, the meaning is passing those thoughts on to other people. It just drives me. Fourth one is we need to have a plan. And a plan is simply some idea of what you're going to deal with. And that's having those realistic, open, honest, confronting conversations about the reality of, I can see the shining stuff, but there's other risks involved with it as well. Have a plan for being able to manage both of those. It may not be a perfect plan, but any plan will allow us to take the next step and gain momentum to move forward rather than being overwhelmed. And the last one is probably one of the most important. It's support. It's being able to throw our hand in the air and say, hey, listen, this is actually bigger than I anticipated. I didn't expect this. I'm starting to become overwhelmed by whatever's happening. Are you able to support me? Are you able to help me? And knowing part of that support is knowing who your inner circle of friends are before something happens. Because we've all got a massive circle of associates. We call them friends. These are people we run into. We've got a smaller group of friends who we go out to dinner with, or we'll catch up at sporting events, or go to the pub, or whatever it is. There is this small group of inner friends that you know that if you have a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can pick up the phone and go, hey, listen, I need to talk to someone. And they'll say, well, we're not talking over the phone. I'm coming to your place now. There's only a small group of people that will have your back. You've got to know who they are before something happens. Because just knowing that they're there gives you more belief in yourself that you're going to have someone at your back to be able to get through whatever you're going to get through. So those 5 drivers: sense of optimism, belief in your ability to influence it, have a life of meaning, planning, some idea of what you're going to deal with, some idea of how you're going to deal with it, and engage in your support. Don't be so big and bold that you have to do it yourself. Ask for support as well.
That's amazing. Totally agree with everything you said there. If anybody wants to reach out to Derrick for motivational speaking engagements, if you'd like to have him at your engagement there, or if you just want to learn more about Derrick and his story, feel free to go to his website, derrickmcmanus.com. Even the videos on there, like he was talking before, if you want to see the video of everything that he was talking about of the incident that happened. Plus, there's a lot more information. I've been on his website over here, and there's a lot more in there about Derrick and his programs that he offers, from durability to human performance, 7 pillars of tactical leadership and high stakes negotiations. Like I said, his videos on there, a little bit more of his background. Check it out. And if you are having some sort of engagement, I'm sure if you reach out to Derrick, he'd love to come speak at it. Try and help anybody out. Derrick, I want to thank you very much for being very humble and coming on here and sharing your story. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. I know I did. And I hope maybe we can get you back on here in a little while later on when we start bringing some of our past guests on and see where you are now and stuff like that. I'd love to bring you back in for maybe a reunion show type thing.
That would be sensational, and it's been great to be on here. I love the way your mind works and the way you delve into things. It really is. It helps me even to be clear about what I'm talking about. So love that. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And for anybody else that has watched this episode, make sure you subscribe, tickle that bell there so you know when we have another episode. And like I said, if you're on the audio version, subscribe on there too. We'd love to bring guests on like Derrick here. And until next time, I hope everybody has a great time. And I remember, empower, motivate, and inspire others to do better and live the best life you can. And until next time, remember, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.